Jubilee House. He just scored himself 100% on the 26 promises that we know that he laid out. And this is an analysis that yourselves at IMANI had put out. And by the way, that's Dennis joining me here in the studio. And in the studio also with me is the president of IMANI. You see him there, Franklin Kujo. You also see Sami Wuku also joining me in the studio. We'll be joined by Felix pretty shortly. He is going to come straight from the Jubilee House to join us here because we have a lot to analyze and to break down. But let's start with the president. Let me get your quick reactions to the president's 100% score before we get into the details. Very, very quickly, very briefly. For you, stay with me because I'm coming to you. First of all, to you, Franklin, the president scores is over 100%. Very quick 1 minute reaction to that.
As Dennis will tell you, I will show you shortly, we are interested in looking at the anchors that are built, anchors to productivity, anchors to revenue mobilization and efficiency in government. So, as I said, they are very easy to attain, and so I'm not surprised. He scored himself 100%.
Okay. Sami, 100%.
Well, I wasn't expecting the president to score himself anything less. But the fact will be in the details that we will be analyzing. But what did you? How many promises did you say he made?
26.
No, it's actually 25. So the NDC themselves got their numbering wrong.
It's 26.
26.
If you check it, they omitted 22. So, Franklin, let me check here.
Don't worry.
It's here.
I think we counted this already.
Yeah, so here. So that's what I'm saying. They omitted 22. So from 21 in their own social contract, they jumped to 23. So it's not 26. You can check it. That notwithstanding.
It's 26.
Well, I'm going by what they sold to the Ghanaian people. This is not from the MPP's headquarters. But that notwithstanding, I believe that there are some issues that we have to really drill down to. Because as of today, for instance, no Ghanaian tertiary student has received any payment of his or her school fees. So if you are telling me that, oh, you directed, and that forms part of you scoring yourself 100%, not a single Ghanaian student has done that. And then there are other issues. I'm sure we'll go.
We'll come to the specific. So this
but
is
that notwithstanding,
so you disagree with the 100%?
I cannot fault the president for scoring himself 100%. It's expected. For us, let's go into the details and to see if this will be accurate or not.
Yeah, we'll come to the details. And I also want to hear what your own score is at the end of the analysis. But let's do the analysis now. So we've had the president. What is the independent assessment of that? And that's what you've done. And I'm delighted that you're here. So let's start with the first point. Sami says it's 25. We counted 26.
26 points.
Okay, why is it 26 and not 25?
So if you break it down sectorally, you'll get one promise coming from the natural resource sector. We did that count one after the other based on the same document, and we arrive at 26. So under economy, they have 10 promises.
Which is all you have here,
yes,
10 under economy.
Here, then 9 under governance issues, then education 3, social services 3, and natural resources. And if you go through another chart, a grid that we are going to show, you are going to see all of them listed on this.
We'll get to that.
Yes, we'll get
now, let's get to your scoring.
Yes.
You scored the president 50%. You divided, first of all, the entire bulk of 26 into 3 distinct groups. Yes. The first is those promises that they've completed.
Fully completed ones.
Those in progress. And those they have failed to complete.
Yes. And as Mr. Kujo rightly said, the way the promises are couched, it is easy to have a very good progress. Some of them are just launch, establish, initiate. And so what we sought to do is that for each of them, every little action may count that it has been done. But if you drill deep, you realize that they are just in progress, and the way they said they are going to do it is not exactly what has been done. For example, the promise to abolish the e-levy, betting, and the emissions levy had within it the COVID levy. And the COVID levy, they said they are going to abolish it by the end of the year, which means on that promise, it's still in progress. Yes. And also, there are certain promises that they have just initiated conversations. For example, the promise to
abolish
the ban on salvage vehicles. It's just a conversation, so it is in progress. But they may account
also the scholarship restructuring.
It's still a bill.
They say they'll take it to Parliament when Parliament resumes.
Yes. And so,
again, it's so hard to verify that. For example, if the guy hasn't even started drafting the thing, but says, I'll submit it to Parliament, you will say it's in progress.
It's in progress. But in the case of the scholarship, you realize that there's been 3 separate conversations. At the launch of the Get Fund Board, the minister mentioned that a bill has been drafted.
But that's my point. Did we see the draft?
The draft is not yet out. And also, in another conversation too, the minister mentioned that Cabinet was discussing that there was going to be a bill that will make the Scholarship Secretariat an authority. So there are two main
which the president touched on.
Yes,
today.
there are 2 ways of verifying the promises. One of them, you have evidence of that, but most of them, it will be news article publications from the institutions. And so the ones that may just reside within the presidency, apart from a news article or maybe an engagement that they will do in separate meetings that you find out, sometimes you may not know when and how these promises have been done. But some of them too, there were public events that you can easily verify.
So let's drill down to the specifics now. So you score the president when it comes to those that have actually completed.
Yes, based on the word
50%. If you're in school, and I know Franklin loves school, this is a pass.
This is a pass. But overall, they've made a good progress. So what you see is that they've attempted each and every one of the promises, except 2 of them. That is the promise to review taxes on equipment imported for industrial and agricultural purposes.
Agribusiness.
And the promise that he said he has done on purging the state security agencies of militia and vigilantism. For example, what he said he has done is an existing practice. Before you enrolled in any security service, you go for a police report.
Except that he also announced today that they've established within the Ghana Armed Forces a board that sort of is doing an analysis of the backgrounds of those already recruited.
And that is a very horrendous tax because at the time of recruitment, all of those checks
should have
been done.
Yes, should have happened.
And so anybody who got into the Ghana Armed Forces or any security agency has a police report.
But it's also because of the assumption in the promise. The assumption is that there are elements who have found their way into the services who shouldn't be there.
Yes. Wants to purge.
Exactly. So you have to purge.
And that also
so to purge, but that is actually what he says is actually a very dangerous one, right?
Yeah.
Because you're saying now that post their recruitment, they've served for a while.
Wow.
You're now going to retroactively determine if indeed they got into the right route and had a
and that raises a lot of questions too about the background check that is done by either the police service or the armed forces, because the background check is supposed to be independent. And so if someone, they identify, the post checks identify someone linked to a militia or vigilante, then it undermines the checks that is done either by the police service or the Ghana Armed Forces, the due diligence that is done before recruiting people, because that process is supposed to be independent.
Yeah.
And so if they found that even one person is connected to a militia or vigilante group, then it means that the whole due diligence process of recruiting people into a security service cannot be guaranteed.
And that will come to the specifics, because there's also a political question there around the assumption that possibly MPP elements who were part of their disbanded vigilante groups are found have been, put back into the security services. So find them and fish them out. There could be that assumption in there.
Partly because in terms of recruitment, it is publicly known that some allocations are given to certain people in the country. Some are politicians.
Yes. The MPs sometimes also confirm that. Let's go to
So
then you say the uncompleted is 8. The thing is, we'll come to the specifics, but this is a general picture of what the president has achieved according to IMANI's own assessment. And so let's look at the specifics. On economy, which obviously had the most promises for obvious reasons, you have the National Economic Dialogue, very easy box to tick.
But the challenge is that for what we are doing at IMANI, what we want to really do is to identify whether the president is laying the right foundations to averting another economic crisis. What we want to avert is that we don't go back to where we used to be. In that case, given the critical point we are in our economy and the socioeconomic challenges, every step the president takes matters. Every city the president commits in expenditure matters. Now, under the National Economic Dialogue, what happens is that there were certain outcomes that have been legislated. For example, the 1.5% primary balance. For you to achieve that, it means that your revenues must grow, you must reduce your tax expenditure. Now, the World Bank did an assessment, and that if you look at VAT, CIT, that's corporate income tax, and personal income tax, the tax expenditure alone was around 18 billion. And if you break it down, VAT tax expenditure, that is the reliefs, the exemptions, and the deductions, were about 72% of the collections. That means that even though you have committed from the National Economic Dialogue a very tough fiscal rule, but for you to achieve that, you need to undertake a lot of tax reforms. That implies that the Independent Fiscal Council that you have legislated, it should be a fiscal council that can bite, not just a fiscal council that political powers can override. That also means that your public procurement reform that you are undertaking should be so tough that it is able to avoid uncompetitive public procurement. At IMANI, we did an assessment that almost 9 out of every 10 of public procurement is uncompetitive. And for you to achieve that 1.5% primary balance of 1.5% of GDP primary balance, you should have a very tough expenditure management. This idea of no approval from the finance minister, no commencement on contract, it is very difficult for the minister to do that. That means then the Ghana electronic procurement system should be connected to the GIFMIS. If that is not done, all the recommendations from the dialogue that has now been legislated, it will be very difficult to achieve that. And mind you, our biggest debt servicing will start around 2027, 2028, and averagely is around 10% of GDP from 2027, 2028. What that means is that revenues must significantly grow for us to achieve that tight fiscal rules that we've set for ourselves. And so the president will be required to undertake massive reforms within our fiscal management, expenditure management. Therefore, the controls like the Fiscal Council, the Independent Value for Money Office must be so independent that they can stop transactions, they can review and ensure value.
So that's the first point. And the legal amendment to implement the 24-hour economy, that still is work in progress.
Yes, it's work in progress.
And that is why you see that in yellow. He's given a bit more detail on this, about the legislation that will go to Parliament on this particular one. Some agencies, he says, have already begun implementing it. But you asked a very fundamental question about the efficiency analysis there, but also the productivity enhancement analysis. We want to see it. Where is it? That will tell us that if you extend the working hours, say, for a DVLA, that necessarily will have economic benefits that will justify the money that you're spending on employing more people, right?
So if you look at the 24-hour economy, you can group it under 3 main categories. One is on administration and services, like the DVLA, the police service, and other things. Then there's one that also on retail businesses. Then another section on industry, agro-processing. If you look at the retail side, the recent Integrated Business Establishment Survey proves that about 92% of businesses are in the informal sector. And you know, in the informal sector, most of these businesses do not run 24 hours. And so on the retail side, there may be a challenge in terms of achieving the 24 hours. On the state sector running 24 hours, some of them were actually doing that, especially the security services.
Yeah, and it says something very curious today. Is that the police is setting up a 24-hour unit. But that is essentially what the police does.
They've been doing that.
There's never been a time when the police have gone to bed. Right? So you have... Oh, I mean, of course, we know that's the Ghana Police Service, but I mean, you know what I mean. The Ghana Police Service, by its very establishment and nature, should operate 24/7, right? So for him to say that it's actually a very active process underway to establish a 24-hour, I wonder what that is.
Given that recently they expanded their call center services, and also the CCTV cameras were supposed to help them work 24 hours. So this is something that already exists. Maybe he wanted to say that it will be expanded or strengthened, but to say they are now running
establishing a unit. In fact, they're establishing a unit.
It's something
for a 24-hour unit. That Felix will join us pretty shortly to explain what that really is.
One thing that he said about here that we can touch on is the time of use tariff. And there are 2 implications. What that simply means is that you are trying to push the major load to the off-peak period so that you give them lower tariff. Now, there was an assessment done in Ghana, and our off-peak is quite during the day. And so what that means is that if you want the businesses to run 24 hours, it means that if you want to use the time of use tariff, then most of them should be running in the day, other than in the night. But the challenge is that even if you overlook that and see you are giving them lower tariff, that revenue under recoveries in the energy sector, how are you going to pay for it? It means that the lower tariffs that will be given to the businesses, it should be so impactful that the returns on the economy can cover for that, considering that we already have some 2 billion energy sector debt that is hanging over the country. So that is one major challenge with giving lower tariffs to industries, also considering that industries pay the highest tariffs. And so if you give them lower tariffs, the question is that those under recoveries, how are you going to recover that? That is something that the president has...
Those questions point to one big gap in all this. We haven't seen the policy.
The policy itself, yes.
I mean, consider you have 120 days, at least we should have a policy document.
Yes.
That we can all scrutinize and interrogate. We don't have that yet.
Isn't the gentleman responsible for that?
Guzitano.
Mr. Guzitano.
Have you seen him?
No.
Yeah, he's part of the Accelerated Export Development Council.
Council, yes.
Yes.
But in terms of seeing him articulating what the thing is, we haven't yet. Okay, let's go to a few. Then we talk about the taxes. We know a lot of them have been scrapped, with the exception of the COVID-19 levy. That's why I say it's in progress. They have told us that they want to do this by the end of the year. I mean, I don't want to stretch it too much. It's so obvious that this is one of the areas that they want to do as part of the major restructuring of the VAT administration fully. Let's look at the one that they haven't done, the only one that they haven't done. But he says they have begun on this matter, which is review taxes on imported equipment for agricultural and industrial purposes.
That review is supposed to be done during the VAT reform engagement. And so as at now, there's currently no publicly available document either within the budget or any paper that shows work on the review of taxes on imported equipment, because one of the major taxes on imported equipment is VAT, and that VAT reform is yet to be done. And there is no public information on whether the import duties on agricultural and industrial equipment has been reduced or there's a reform ongoing.
Tonight, I got this update from the CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness, who says they have met a few times, the minister, to sort of now begin a conversation around what this review should look like. So something is happening.
Yes, but because the major aspect will be the VAT, and also other levies connected to that. And remember that they said they were going to undertake some review of the whole port handling charges and everything. And so until all of that work starts, nothing has really been done.
And then the other ones are really tick the boxes. Launching is so easy. We know they've launched in Jumara, 1 million coders. National apprenticeship program has also been launched. He's telling us today that one of the things I heard that pleased me on this particular one is that he's directed that they should be mindful of diversity in the recruitment of their apprentice. So they are talking about women and also people with disability, which is a good thing.
Yeah, but Evans, one problem with these initiatives is that since 2006, we've had almost 10 youth employment programs like this.
And they've all not worked.
They've all not worked. And the challenge is that after the base grants that are given to them, they face heavy financing challenges because there are no extended financing support for them. It is until recently that the finance minister has directed that about 5% of a pension investment should be given to venture capital. If you look at the nature of the businesses that may qualify in the Jumara and National Apprenticeship, they are mostly likely to be in the informal sector. So the focus of the program should be how do we formalize them so that they can also access much better financing. The other challenge too is that for them to also make meaningful impact on the economy, then the Jumara and the National Apprenticeship Program should be well targeted to high impact areas. It shouldn't be across board because we've seen how YouStart, NEIP was thinly spread on a lot of businesses. However, the returns to the economy was not that significant. The challenge is that as long as they operate informally on a small scale within our informal sector, it is very hard for them to create enough jobs. And so over time, you have another program coming up that will also seek to address the same problem. So the main key thing that should be done under this program is that they should address the governance problem of helping these businesses properly formalize. Once they formalize, then they can access some of these funding from either the Venture Capital Trust Fund or, let's see, the Development Bank of Ghana, because if you look at the Development Bank of Ghana, most of the business they are supporting are SMEs. And so if you don't formalize them, then they don't qualify for some of these. And also that means is that even if they set up businesses, you can't properly tax them because they mainly will be operating in the informal sector. Then on the 1 million coders, what we've discussed is that it is not difficult for Ghanaian coders to create programs, but the entrepreneurial side of it, how they get these programs to be properly launched, well invested, and solve problems. So it should be well connected to how the solutions that come out of these 1 million coders, the entrepreneurial side is properly structured so that either through partnership, whether equity investment or identifying potential investment areas so that the solutions that this will come up with will be useful.
Okay, so we need to run through a bit because we'll sit down for another hour, and Felix is also going to join us pretty shortly. So some of the key ones, surrounding the economy, establishing an accelerated export development council, which is something that they've done. Allocate seed money to set up the Women's Development Bank. It's something that they've ticked the box on.
Challenge with that one.
Yeah, please, very quickly.
One challenge is that if you look at where most women operate in the informal sector, and in Ghana, male-led businesses are more profitable than women-led businesses. And if you look at the recent Integrated Business Establishment Survey, most women-led businesses are earning an annual profit less than 10,000. And if you look at the interest rate, even DBG, if you use the DBG model, how much they on-lend to PFIs for them to also on-lend to businesses, it's around 18%. So if the PFIs add at least on average 5% to it, it is still getting to the average 25% to 30% interest rate. And so the Women's Development Bank is not going to significantly bring down interest rate so that most women can access. It will target the few women who are doing formal businesses. But the challenge is that most of these development banks too they face operational challenges. For example, if you take DBG, about 20% of their on-lending done in 2023 went to women-led businesses. So DBG alone can be used to accelerate financing for women, and we don't need a whole new women's development bank because one, if it is about bringing down interest rate, it can't do that. Two, in terms of setting it up, we may need development partners to support us to meet the capital requirement. And when we set them up, the process of on-lending to PFIs and crowding in more PFIs investment also takes time, which means that very few women are likely to benefit. So what the government ideally should do is that, why don't they strengthen the DBG model or leverage existing innovation activities like the NEIP, the National Apprenticeship Program, the Jumera, to support more women-led businesses so that you don't create another NIB and ADB. You know, the government is engaging the World Bank to support them to recapitalize NIB and ADB.
From as far as analysis is concerned, the way it's currently being structured seems to suggest that if nothing happens based on the suggestion, it may also end up struggling. The Black Star experience was launched recently.
Yes.
But you raised a fundamental question very, very briefly on this, is that where is the line item in the budget?
Yes, in the line item, we didn't see any line item for that in the budget. Another challenge is that one of the key challenges that the tourism sector faces is taxes and also maintaining their momentum.
Okay.
So what this Black Star experience, it shouldn't be just about launching initiatives or showcasing Ghana's culture, but it must address structural problems within the...
And then we have the review of Customs Amendment Act to scrap the law banning the importation of cyber. They've begun conversations around
this is counterproductive.
Yes, but obviously because you have...
set up the Ghana Automotive Development Policy.
And you brought in VW
and others. Volvo, I think Toyota also set up an assembly plant. Now, if you scrap this, what that means is that you create a worse business environment also for them. But the challenge too is that when that policy was set, in terms of the financing or innovative finance to help Ghanaians access and also buy domestically produced cars, that was not done. And that is why those locally assembled vehicles are struggling. And so if you are removing this, then that means that there should be an alternative way of supporting the existing assembly.
And you haven't figured that out yet.
Yes, and what you can do is to set up the finance.
You actually see the sector minister in the engagement actually admitting it's going to be tougher than they thought.
Yes.
When they put this in the 120-day social contract. Carry out the shake-up of all loss-making SOEs. Today, the president has told us that this will mean some of the SOEs will be scrapped altogether.
Yes.
He's also told us tonight that they will have to also list, some of them will have to list on the stock exchange and focus on paying dividends.
And that is useful because, Evans, if you look at since 2019, I think 2019 to 2023 or 2022, the average outflows from the government to SOEs are around 7 billion. But the average inflows from SOEs to the government is negative 2 billion. It means that the government is spending more but getting nothing from the SOEs. We need to prioritize because anytime they take up liabilities, it becomes government liabilities. So we need to look at the high-performing
Having listened
SOEs.
to the president, having listened to he broke it down into what exactly.
Yes.
Doesn't that address the questions that you have?
It does. And so we need to look at the high-performing one or high-impact areas.
So basically, there are governance
These are governance issues that need
holistically they need to
address.
address.
These promises will not be laying the right foundation to address or averting another.
And you touched on them earlier. Let's look at the governance. Again, there is the next one with a lot more. Some of them, a lot of the boxes ticked. 14 days to complete list of cabinet. He did that. Policy to ban appointees from buying state assets. He's talked about it today, that in fact, if you do that, it is outright termination. In fact, if they find out that you are even in the process, he says tonight, you will go.
But even on that, there should be even much more stronger mechanisms to address the political patronage and clientelism, where you have other political actors who may not be appointees, but will be benefiting from allocations. Remember in 2022, there was this huge challenge with vehicles that were allocated from the port. It raised a whole lot of conversation that the allocations were coming from the presidency and all of that. So there may be government appointees may not be the ones buying it, but there will be clientelist networks who will be benefiting from that. So that is one of the things.
Look at it. And it goes to the leanest and most efficient government. That's one you say is ongoing.
Yes.
The president says he's ticked that box completely. And I see why you're saying that.
In terms of numbers, 60, yes, that's true.
What about the most efficient?
But efficiency, it means that public sector delivery must be efficient.
Yeah.
So you can't measure efficiency with numbers.
Yeah.
Another challenge is that as part of the public sector reform, in the promise implementation, they have not done anything significant on public sector reform.
Yeah.
Another thing you have to also look at is that in terms of expenditure, even though some expenditures may come down, but there will be other areas of expenditure that also take up the cost. And so in terms of measuring efficiency, we can't use the size in terms of 60 ministers to measure efficiency. Yeah. But at the end, overall, we have to see public sector deliver more, especially on budget.
So it's a function of outcomes, really.
Yes.
I mean, how to measure
budget implementations and in terms of budget execution.
And the code of conduct is out very recently. There are questions about that. We'll sit down. We'll expand this when we sit down. There are a lot of questions. We did a show on it yesterday. Reopen investigation into major unresolved criminal cases. He's talked about some of the updates on what is happening. He's actually mentioned Azugu, who was very famous back then, that he's now cooperating to sort of fish out those who were also culpable in that thing that Yawaso Wagon violence. Initial probe into the man-made disaster Kosomo spillage. He's told us tonight an update on that the committee has been set up. They've actually come with recommendations that if they don't implement, and we have another disaster like that for Makosomo, people are going to lose their jobs.
But one thing too is that we have to also, the president must also be cognizant of the climate implications. If there is a very heavy climate disaster that leads to that one you can't blame people, particularly because if you don't build our early warning systems or technology, that one.
But that's part of the recommendations, right?
Yes.
I mean, they should.
But one thing that is important is compensating flood victims.
He says that they are now in the process of cabinet is going to be recommending the compensation.
But Evans, you know, the challenge is that we don't have a clear plan or legislation that guide us on compensating victims. You know, this is not the first time. During the dry spell, the agreement...
So you need some sort of policy, something that will guide...
policy that will guide you, because sometimes there's also accountability challenges. When these allocations are done in the budget, nobody follows through to ensure that what was allocated actually got to the flood victims.
Yeah, so that's an
2023, there was an allocation...
We're going to sit down to expand on this. Because we need a whole hour to sort of break this down a bit more. Initial steps to compensate flood victims is a point. Don't just do that, have a policy guidance. You should forensic audits into shady public expenditure. We know they've set up a lot of work on this. I learned tonight what he said, PDS, they're investigating that. He also says that the banks, that another one has also been established. Commerce is going to purge state security of militia. That's what we talked about at the beginning. Same challenges
that need
governance issues,
especially on the disaster management.
On the education question, National Consultative Conference on Education. I want to come to the point that Sami made. I guess that one of the most controversial ones, which is the free tertiary first year policy, the no academic fee policy. You say it's in progress. The president says they've done it. It's how you're measuring it, right? The policy has been done. It's been budgeted for for 2025. Preparation has been done, but they've told us that implementing it, they would credit the students because they've already paid before the budget was read for second year. So isn't that done?
Well, so the reason why we say it's in progress is that, one, the students were admitted in January when they were in government. And at the time of making this promise, they knew the admission calendar. And so there should have been, the moment they took office, there should have been provisions made to the universities to take care of this. It's either the government pay the universities later on. But even if they push it forward, there are critical challenges with this.
Very quickly.
One of the problems is that after the first year, now from the second year to the final year, they expect that the students who cannot afford will rely on the student loan trust fund. The challenge is that we have a very low gross tertiary enrollment rate. 2022 was about 38% of those who completed SHS actually got into tertiary. The World Bank puts it around 22%. What this will do is that it will create an unintended consequence. We have a lot more people going into tertiary, but when they get to the second year to the fourth year, if they cannot pay, the student loan trust fund cannot pay. Because if you look at how much allocation they get, from 2018 to 2023, what we see in the expenditure of the student loan trust fund is that their major allocation comes from Get Fund. But if you look at actual allocation and actual disbursement, the gap has always been lowered by about 40%, which means that they are not actually getting their allocations. What that means is that it's recently that the Education Minister said Get Fund should raise the SLTF allocation to 60 million. The challenge is that if government is unable to make more revenue and create more allocation to SLTF, it will be overwhelmed. One, the SLTF is unable to cover the full fees or the full education expenditure of even beneficiaries. As at their 2023 annual report, only 44,000 loan beneficiaries were listed, and they spent 52 million Ghana cedis. Now, they're expecting that even if the Get Fund, their major funder, raises it to 60 million, when these students get to second year, especially those who will benefit right from the first year, the SLTF will be overwhelmed. They will have to now thinly spread their minimal allocation over a lot of students, which means that if you take the average expenditure of almost between 8 to 15,000 for you to go through a tertiary school in a year, and the allocation as of 2022, every student was able to get around 2,000 cedis. What that challenge creates is that you are going to create a lot more gap because you can't fund most of the students who will depend on the SLTF. So what the government needs to do is that it's going to create extra fiscal costs. So the government must find money to fund the SLTF so that they can...
But they budgeted for it. They know how much they're going to spend.
So they budgeted for the no academic fee policy for the year one. By year two to final year, most of them may have to rely on the student loan trust fund. And their
budget will not be enough.
It will not be enough to cover that because that fund,
as far as the
major one.
natural resources concerned, they talk about the ban illegal mining. The Blue Water Initiative has been launched, but there are fundamental questions about the state of our river bodies and the fight against illegal mining. That's still a big issue. We'll come to that. We'll come and discuss
one thing that we don't talk about. That
yeah, we'll come. Let's sit and expand that. So that's a verdict.
Yes.
So the quick three key verdicts for you is...
One, the president has made good progress on all the promises because apart from two, he's touched on every one of them, and 50% of them he's been able to fully implement, which is good progress. However, the initiatives that he's implementing, most of them are not laying the right foundations to address the structural challenges in the various sectors that they are implementing. So
they are ticking the boxes, but not addressing the fundamental challenge.
Not addressing the fundamental challenge. So what is likely to happen is that we may create a lot more fiscal challenges for ourselves because some of these are going to be expenditures that must continue. And that if revenues do not grow and we are not innovative in strengthening and broadening our economy, considering the crisis ahead of us from 2027 and 2028, we are going to face much more challenges.
Yeah, and you make a very important point. Most of the flagship programs will impose additional fiscal stress.
And we were just talking about the challenges the Student Loan Trust Fund may face if budget allocation to them is not increased. Another challenge is that some of the investment that is going to be done must be properly targeted in high-impact areas.
So that which is the point we made earlier. But fundamentally, if you're just joining us, the president just finished addressing the nation. He's assessed himself. He scores himself 100%. But this is the IMANI assessment. Fully completed is 50%. Those in progress is 42%, and just 8% left to be done. They haven't touched at all. Right after this break, I'm going to be joined by Felix Kwachifosu. He's a chief government spokesperson. You have Sami Wuku with me here in the studio. You have Franklin Kuju also here with me in the studio. We're now going to get into the analysis and hear the alternative view from the NPP, and then get some clarification still from the government spokesperson. Stay with us. And thanks for staying with us for this special PM Express. The president finished his assessment of his own 120 days. He did not mention a particular score, but from everything he says, he appears to have scored himself 100%. And we have in the studio with me, as you may have already noticed from the conversation we started earlier, we have Sami Wuku and we have Felix now joining us, the Chief Government Spokesperson. Franklin is still with us, and Dennis as well. I guess, Felix, if you don't mind clarifying for us, because it is very quantitative, really, because it was, first of all, was it 25 or 26?
It's actually 26.
Okay.
26, yes.
26. And
from Felix agrees that what was printed from their website is 25.
No, it's 26. There's one on a law
but you're not
to regulate
that this was good. I'm only asking just for clarity. It's not just not a banter. But I just want us to be factual on this matter.
The manifesto was launched publicly. Everybody heard him. Everybody who listened to the president would know that he recited 26.
It was 26.
What you are saying is.
So the president personal score is
the one that is missing in Sami's document is the one on the salvage vehicles.
It's a fair point.
That is all. So there's really no issue, actually. The president addressed it.
But I guess just to acknowledge his point, that one is also missing. So that's what he has.
Yes, but the president has just delivered an address.
Let's go to substance.
He listed 26.
Yeah, let's go to the substance of that.
The president is the most authoritative voice in government. So
based on what we heard, he appears to have marked himself 100%. Because now everybody's putting him, everybody's assessing. We gave him 52, IMANI gives him 50. If you listen to the MPP before, as I spoke to the Deputy General Secretary, they said it was 46. The president gives himself 100%. Is that a fair conclusion?
I don't think that he was immodest enough to give himself
100%. Okay.
I think that it is fair to say that we have touched virtually every promise that we made. There are some of the promises that involved processes that the public is unaware of because of the way that they are done. One example is the setting up of the Ghana Scholarships Authority. I was in cabinet on 16th April when the minister brought an amendment bill which seeks to set up this authority and streamline the award of scholarships and address the problems that the president highlighted. The public is unaware of this. So you would say that it has not been done, but it has been done. The final solution to that lies in the hands of Parliament, not the executive. So the executive has done its part. But because Parliament is not in session, there's little you can do about it until they return. So that is being done. The bit about 24-hour economy, there are many things that are happening. I have been in cabinet, several briefings have been made. I've seen the plans that they have, I've seen what they've done. Indeed, Mr. Guzitano, and my brother would admit, I don't know whether he was there on that day, but he has actually briefed Parliament on the processes leading up to where we are. There's a proposed amendment to the GIPC Act. There's one to the Labour Act, and there are other things that are being done. So these things, because you may not know or be aware of. And
then purging the security agencies of.
Absolutely.
I think he just.
That one has been done. Indeed, and you know that some of the security agencies don't operate in the public glare. The armed forces, for instance, have set up, a team to look at that. The Interior Minister inaugurated one. National security. At the very least, the likes of Double and Co are no longer with national security. And you can classify them among those who fall within the category of what we say we will peg the security agencies off. So these are not matters.
Double was part of the Ayawaso as well.
His name is Akumia, his official name. But he was one of the thugs that the NPP recruited. Yeah. He's no longer there.
He was very famous at the time we did the Ayawaso by-election.
He was actually famous, not famous. But he's no longer there, for instance. So these things are happening. The military will not report on these things.
So just for clarity, what's the score then as far as government is concerned?
Well, you can, when you look at the presentation the president presented, you can say that 20 of them have been done. 5 are in progress.
Okay.
But they are in progress to the extent that what you need to bring it to finality lies in the hands of other agencies that you don't necessarily control.
So one of them you haven't done at all, you haven't touched?
No, there's none that we haven't touched.
So it's 20 all of them. Done?
Yes. 5
in progress. That makes it 25. Then that's the one. That's
no, even that has been touched. Okay. That one involves a law on salvage vehicles.
Okay.
Because you know that there was a ban on it in favor of local assembly.
That way can confirm you've begun something.
Something, indeed, it's the trade ministry.
So then let's do the math for me. If
the trade ministry,
yes,
the trade ministry that is handling that.
Yes, we actually said it.
Absolutely.
We actually said it.
It is something that you can say
is in progress. Yes. So if it's according to the government, if 20 has been done, 6 in progress, what it brings the percentage to what?
Somewhere around 79 to 80, because each promise should be around 3.9 or 4.
Okay.
If there are 25,
Give me the exact so that we can, at least it gives us a sense of what...
79 or 80.
79, okay. 80.
And indeed, it's also crucial
Sorry?
to know that some of the promises are composite. For instance, the one on social intervention involves a lot. There are some of them that have as many as 6 or 7. And all of them have been done. So in terms of weighting, you may want to assess that.
Some of them will weight more than
exactly.
others.
Some of them will weight more. And so they come with significant capital outlay. They involve a lot of money running into billions.
Father, you said 19 billion, some of the flagships, you put it together in your report?
Billion, if you add a big push.
Yes. So stay with me. I just wanted to establish that. So, I mean, now we have some clarity. Government's assessment is 75, 80%.
Okay, so first of all, let me get into the meaty details.
Yes, the specifics.
The 120 days of President Mahama. I'll be dealing with the issues contained in their social contract and even issues outside the social contract because it's still within the 120 days. It is important to also establish that within this last 120 days, we've also experienced considerable level of this power outages. It's important to put that into perspective. Secondly, within the last 120 days, we've also experienced over 21,000 young people, and in excess of that, losing their jobs through reckless termination of appointment, and some even going as far back as 3 years into their contract. These are ordinary Ghanaians. Again, also within the last 120 days, we've had a government establishing clearly, and even through its budget for 2025, that there's going to be a ban on public sector recruitment. This was also contained in the finance minister's presentation of the budget of the president to Parliament. Now, and also if you talk about constituting the leanest and most efficient government under the Fourth Republic in the first 90 days, I find that interesting. Felix, more or less, is occupying a position that, to all of us within the space, is like the Minister for Information, more or less, per his role. Not a single chief director has been fired, or the architecture of the ministries that they claim they have merged, none of them. Can you tell me that because now you've scrapped the Ministry of Information, the ISD, you've had a whole office template being changed and all that. So clearly, you cannot say that the fact that you've merged constitutes, a considerable reduction in terms of the burden on the taxpayer. In fact, when Kojo Nkrumah MP was Minister for Information, the extra money he had on his salary, because he was MP and minister, was just around 2,000 cedis. So that cannot be a significant saving in any way. Again, it's also important for me to establish within this within the first 120 days of President Mahama, that if you take this document that talks about his social contract, and Franklin says something from the onset. Was it Franklin or it was Asari? He said the way the language has been couched, it's very easy to tick the boxes. If you tell me that within the first 14 days, I'm going to complete the list of cabinet ministers for parliamentary approval, this is the prerogative of the president to make this appointment, to form your government. It's good you were able to form it early, and Parliament cooperated to get them through. However, holding a national economic dialogue, beyond that, what happened? And then if you talk about, establishing,
IMANI's analysis says some of the recommendations had now found its way into the budget and into the government official
within the 120 days. Yes. I'm going by what is contained in the
So they did the
convening.
But in substance, the recommendations fed the budget. Yeah. And if implemented, in fact, legislation has actually been passed.
The PFM Act.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just to...
We've had the PFM Act had been in place before the NDC came into existence.
The amendment.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying, that so it's no new. And let me also put on record again, and for the avoidance of doubt, that you've convened a stakeholders engagement or meeting as far as the education sector is concerned. You take a box. But the very meaty ones that Felix and the NDC was in opposition, they were also very vociferous about talking about, let's go to the mining sector. During the campaign, and within the first 120 days, the NDC themselves, I think it's in point 19. Yeah. Ban illegal and new mining activities in forest reserves. Roll out Tree for Life and Blue Water Initiative to heal sustainably, harness and blah, blah, blah. You go into that. Evans, Joy FM, multimedia. You've been very loud on this matter, to the extent that you've had NDC constituency chairman, even in a scuffle with security operatives when excavators were seized. Again, just not too long ago, Multimedia and two Erastus also reported that an organized small-scale mining company had their premises seized by operatives of the national security, and now party foot soldiers are being asked to mine in there. For who? And not a single, I listened to the president also very well. I can tell you for a fact that not a single initiative has been undertaken by the government which will be new to what existed in the past. And I'll tell you why. If you talk about Chamfan and these mining equipment being seized and burnt, it was happening before the NDC got into office. If you also talk about seizure of these excavators, these things were happening. If you're talking about security officials, the police, the military, being in the mining areas and driving them out, it's nothing new because it existed before.
What about tracking of the excavators?
Well, but we had all these ones there. But that is not even the point. The NDC were very clear in the promises that they also made. And I'll take in that. One, declare state of emergency. The NDC backed the call for a state of emergency while in opposition. And the then candidate, now President Mahama, was very loud and clear on that matter. Number two, ban all forms of small-scale mining for a while. That hasn't been done. So how do you score yourself?
All forms?
All forms. I'm not the one saying it. It's contained in there.
Where? Is it the manifesto?
Oh, but these were things that they said.
No,
it's
but
not new to
it's
you.
important.
It's not new to you.
No,
they never said that.
No,
on your own PM Express, you've interviewed people even within that.
No, but I want to be specific because there's what they included in the manifesto.
Free all arrested Ghanaians and give them back their seized excavators and go after the kingpins. Are you saying you never heard this?
No, but it's not about whether I heard or not. It's about also pointing us to who said it. We need to hold somebody to street proof. So who actually make the point?
President Mahama said, we are going after the wrong people in the Galamsey fight. He said the kingpins are out there and we are instead going after these small-scale miners. And when he becomes president, he's going to ensure that there's amnesty for all arrested Galamseyers. And then we go after the kingpins. And you didn't hear this?
No, that he said.
Yeah, so that's what I'm
talking about the other ones you said. I don't recall hearing anybody say that. Repeal the
ally that allows for mining in our forests. This evening again, I heard the president. He said, it's before Parliament for us to amend. You know, let's be clear.
To take away his power. To give permission for mining forest reserve.
If we are to also go by the very document that was sold to us for us to analyze. In fact, in any case, it's a social contract. You are supposed to go by it, respect the very dictates of what you told us you were going to do. In fact, you can have a candidate for president who will not give himself a 120 days for you to score me. He can go with the extent that the first 6 months I'll come give a full accountability of what I've done. So once you give yourself 90 days, 120 days, you are asking us to judge you based on that. Yeah. Now let me go to the special import levy. This was a levy that was going to expire by 2025. The NDC in Parliament even wanted it to go beyond 2028. Now they've extended it from the 2025 expiration date to 2028. This is not a government. This is not what they promised us while they were in opposition. They were actually clear and very loud that, look, they believe this continued to burden the Ghanaian people. But let me score them good on the scrapping of the e-levy, the 1%. And Felix, you and your government, you've done well on scrapping that 1% e-levy and the 10% betting tax. That gives you 11%. Is that not it? They've done a good job. But on our blind side, in the middle of the night, they've imposed 14% tariff increase when it comes to electricity. Again, they are also asking us to also pay additional 4% on water. If I do not stake Lotto, I'm definitely not going to be affected by 10% betting tax. Hope you know that. Again, if I do not engage in electronic transactions, there's no way I'm going to suffer from this 1% e-levy, whether it's in place or not. However, getting access to power and light is no longer a luxury, and every Ghanaian desires to have.
So they rob Peter to pay for.
It's exactly what that's what I'm saying. I'm scoring them on the 1% e-levy. I'm also scoring them on the 10% betting tax. But if you add it, it's 11%. But they are asking me to pay 14% increment in electricity, 4% for water. That is clear case of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Again.
Finally, so I can hear from Felix, and then I'll come to Franklin.
I know Franklin wants to also make a comment. But I felt that you would have allowed me on the...
No, yes,
on the COVID-19. At least I'm in minority here. Allow me some...
No, there are only two politicians.
I'm in minority. Am I not an opposition MP?
You are a mighty minority.
So if you check the panel and I'm in majority here, you will know. That's all I'm trying to say.
No, we are equal, actually. Because it's one...
Let me allow that. Yeah. Again, on the issue of the COVID-19 levy, I really do not understand what the government meant by saying that, oh, there's a whole tax reforms and all that they are looking at. Others were scrapped. So if you're going to take a holistic view of your taxes and how to reform the tax sector, it's a different matter. We've also experienced some interesting development with our currency. And I don't know if I'm going to have a second bite or you want...
Yeah, you will. The currency is a big one because I think it fits into the economic achievement like 120 days. Because it's doing some magic in the last few weeks. Felix, so forgive me. Yeah, so what's your verdict? What's your score?
On the currency as well, you wanted to make...
Yeah, but I'll come back. I want to come back to that. So what's your score? Having done assessment?
Honestly speaking...
What will you give?
What I have, the document that we have here was technically about 25 promises. But Felix is saying that I think one was omitted. Let me even say... So let me stick to the 25 that I used for the analysis. And I can see that they fulfilled 11.
Okay.
They also partially fulfilled 2, and they failed to fulfill 12. So if I'm able to do that analysis and comparatively, I think they score about 48%. Okay.
So 48 is not, is it pass? Is it pass or fail? What is it, the academics, frankly?
You asked me of a score.
It's a minor pass.
So that's your
Joy FM multimedia decided to give 52.
Yes. So that's your 48.
Did 50.
50. You are
I've given you my analysis of 48.
48. Okay. Felix.
You know, Evans, we are here to discuss President Mahama's first 120-day commitment. So it is important that we stick to the subject. I mean, for someone who wants to grade another person, he is not even complying with the rubric of the examination. So he, in fact, is going to get 0 if any strict invigilator takes a script. You see, the fact is that President Mahama made specific commitments. So in order to assess him, you look at what he said and weigh it against what he has done. That is the only way you can make meaning of this discussion. All the extraneous matters Samuel raised are matters that you can discuss elsewhere when you come to discuss the overall performance of government. But here, we are talking about the 120-day promise. That is what the president made a speech about. So let me address them. And I would like to address from the standpoint of some of the claims he made in respect of the specific promises. The thing he said about electricity tariff, and I'm surprised that Sami would do this. You see, duplicity must leave public discourse. He was in government. Their government went to the IMF for an extended credit facility. Anytime they went to take a tranche of that facility, there were specific benchmarks that they needed to tick off. The last review they did before we came to power, if you check page 71 of the memorandum that the IMF has published on its website, they agreed as a precondition to taking the $336 million that they took gleefully sometime in December 2024. That in the following year, there will be quarterly adjustment of electricity tariff. It is captured on page 71. So you go and make a binding agreement that we cannot pull from. Because the IMF, they don't deal with political parties, they deal with governments. So the agreement you signed with the IMF is binding on any government that takes power. So we come in and we have no option than to respect the agreement that you've reached. And you turn around and say that we have robbed Peter to pay Paul. How did we do that? It is not an honest assessment of the situation. So if Ghanaians are paying 14% more tariff than they are doing, it is because the MPP said that should be the case. They signed it. There's nothing you can do about it. It is rigid. The moment you flout that, the IMF program goes out of the window. And the moment it goes out of the window, you know exactly what will happen.
But I'm keeping them honest. You know, in opposition, John Mahama also said...
Felix.
Yes. John Mahama also said...
Claire, you know that this...
John Mahama also says you would attempt to have another conversation with the IMF on the program.
Of course, but the conversation...
So that is one of the areas that you yourself have said in the conversation that is something you wanted to...
The conversation with the IMF does not absolve us of our responsibilities and commitments under the program. There are consequences for breaching the agreement we've had with the IMF.
But you wanted to review. You wanted to have a constitutional review.
No. You
discuss
aspects of the program that allow you to make adjustments. But if you've gone to take money and committed to do ABC, you cannot run away from it only because governments have changed. So that must be made clear. So when he comes to sit here and pretends that it is the doing of President Mahama, he's not being honest, unless he is disputing that his finance minister went for this review and agreed on this. The second point also is that this propaganda about lean government and no significant saving must stop. Look, when we came to power, President Mahama said that he would even appoint 60 ministers. As we speak, he has 56, which is actually lower than what he said he would do. At a point in time under the MPP, there were 125 ministers. And Sami knows what it costs to maintain one minister. Samson, if you put everything that a minister gets together, the vehicles, the houses, the salaries, the allowances, and all the facilities, we are talking close to 15 million Ghana cedis in the 4 years that we have a minister in place. Multiply that by 125 and do the math. So if you have 56 ministers, as opposed to having 125, and there's a difference of 69, by all means you make savings. There's no dispute about this. It is so straightforward that even unelected persons would understand. Again, he used me as an example. So let me also use my sector as an example. You see, at the Flagstaff House alone, where I manage communications, they had 28 people in the information management apparatus. Today we have 7. He says that because chief directors have not been dismissed, no, we have saved nothing. What has happened is that all those people who were there, 76 of them, directors and other staff at the Ministry of Information, they have had to be reassigned. If they were not reassigned, we are going to have to employ new people in the places that they have been reassigned. Even today, one of them has been reassigned to the Community Water and Sanitation Division because they needed an administrator. If he did not exist or she did not exist, they were going to have to employ somebody. So that is a saving you make. Why? If 28 people were managing information at the presidency and today you have 7, Samson, wouldn't you make a saving?
You mean Evans?
Sorry, Evans, wouldn't you make a saving? This is straightforward. So I don't know why they dispute what is obvious and what is so glaring. Look, if you look at the budget of the Office of the President alone, if you take goods and services and capital expenditure, almost 420 million Ghana cedis has been saved compared to last year's budget. And it is simply because of the numbers that have reduced. So this is a fact you cannot run away from. Again, he speaks about the impact of the National Economic Dialogue on this our budget. And I'm happy that our colleagues from IMANI have made the point already. Today, out of the discussions for the National Economic Dialogue, we have set a debt ceiling that by 2024, our debt to GDP ratio cannot exceed 45%. Out of that, today, we have committed to running a surplus of 1.5% every year going forward so that we stop this perennial habit of falling into deficits that impact our macro-fiscal framework. So these are tangible outcomes that you cannot dispute. Come to education, for instance. The president highlighted that because of the educational consultation forums that have gone on, we have received in excess of 2,000 proposals. 20,000 Ghanaians have been interviewed to assess what they think about free SHS. Next month, or I beg your pardon, later this month, the report of the National Education Forum will be made public. And you will see the impact that it will have on education policy going forward. So nobody can sit there and see that that forum, that consultation was not useful. It was very useful. Now let me come to the issue of illegal mining. Again, Samson, we are discussing the 120-day contract that President Mahama signed with the people of Ghana. So if you want to assess his performance on that, you look at the specific wording. Sami has a document in front of him which reads, ban illegal and new mining activities in forest reserves.
Actually reading his document.
Yes, because I'm using it as reference because the facts are here and yet he's saying something different. Roll out our Tree for Life and Blue Water Initiative to heal and sustainably harness the environment by turning areas and water bodies degraded by illegal mining into economic and ecological recovery hubs. Samson, which of these have we not done?
You mean Evans?
So I beg your pardon. I don't know why I keep on calling you Samson. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me. Yes.
He came with something in mind.
There's something called scotoma. Your eyes see what your mind was.
I know.
Now, which of these have we not done? He's an MP just like myself. On 20th March, he sat in Parliament and witnessed the laying of LI 2462, which seeks to remove the power that allows the president to grant concessions into forest reserves. Indeed, the Attorney General proposes that there's a more robust way to do this by amending the Minerals and Mining Act, Act 703, to completely prohibit forest reserves as places where you can mine. So there's robust legislative work going on to ensure that this promise that President Mahama has made comes to fruition. Again, Evans, the Tree for Life initiative, on 21st March, I was with the president in in the Ashanti region, to launch it, where we expect to use afforestation or reforestation as a way of safeguarding the environment. The Blue Water Initiative, you've seen 2,000 young men and women clad in yellow and black uniforms who have been recruited. Now, people erroneously think that these are people who are going to face off with the armed bandits operating in the forest. No, that's not what they are going to do. They are going to be around the water bodies to help with fact-finding and getting in touch with appropriate authorities to respond to persons who seek to degrade the environment. So all these things have been done. And yet, Sami is here saying that it has not been done. In fact, you recall that one of the first steps we took when we came into power was that we revoked all mining leases that we believe were granted irregularly. You recall that directive? That was a first step towards ensuring that people don't secure these leases and misuse them. Again, governmental complicity in Galamsey, which was one of the reasons why they could not fight it, is no longer the case. Why? We know about the original chairman and women organizers and other things.
But we've also had accusations.
Yes, but this is something I can assure you. I can assure you, President Mahama has made it clear that you cannot use the name of the NDC or membership of SIN as reason why you go into that. The matter that he refers to in respect of some people who purported to be using national security as a conduit to do this, 6 people have been arrested in that respect. Indeed, only yesterday, I was at the German embassy, and I made the point that as we speak, 71 people are in the grips of the law for engaging in Galamsey. 150 excavators and other equipment, including pump action guns, have been confiscated by the state. When they were empowered, the last time excavators were given to them, did they not develop wings and fly? So there is a marked departure from what used to obtain. Of course, nobody said anywhere. President Mahama never ascribed a timeline for dealing with Galamsey. He never said he will get rid of Galamsey in 4 months, because you all know that it's an insidious problem that has gone on for years.
Except that because it's 120 days,
of course,
you ban illegal.
Of course, but that has been done. He has done what he needs to do.
Except the issue there is, how do you ban an illegality? The illegality is an illegality.
No, but the point is that you need legislation to strengthen your ability to deal with.
But we haven't seen any legislation.
But the legislation, the LI has been amended. It's in Parliament. 20th March, it was what? He was there. If I'm not telling you, you see. And then I've also told you that when Parliament comes back, the Minerals and Mining Act is also going to be amended to expressly ban mining activities.
Yeah, the president said that today.
In forest reserves. Yeah. So I don't know what else was.
Franklin, I'll come back to you for a second.
It's fair.
Franklin, on the subject of the substance of what the president said he's done, you raise a fundamental question about overall, this must have economic benefits to us.
Oh, indeed.
It must. It's not just about ticking the box. There must be clear outcomes that at the end of the day we can measure them by, not just say you've ticked the box. You assess the 26. Do they deliver on these in a way that is very substantive, that delivers economic benefits, that will transform this economy? And I saw that word in your analysis, transformative. Are these transformative enough?
Well, it looks to me that some of the flagship interventions essentially are going to cost us that much. I mean, if you combine the one that has to do with the employment, the 1 million, the Jumaura, and all of those comes to about 19 billion cedis, right? If you included the big push, 19 billion. Now, that's money we are going to spend, right? It's important that we get some return on that money, which is why we are saying that these interventions must have been rigorously assessed to ensure that there's some value addition to the economy. Because clearly speaking, if you're going to lose, if you're going to spend 19 billion out of your funds, there must be a way of finding how you can raise that money back. And I think we suggested, for instance, that if you undertook some public financial management reforms, that should also include alternatives or ideas where you can raise more money. If you wanted to invest, for instance, in the mineral sector, I mean, go back to the should I call it DAO, or those, under the MPP, we had a situation where we couldn't add any significant assets in terms of, access to our oil resources. And I think it's important that the government begins to find ways and means of unlocking those opportunities to increase maximum revenue so that they can take care of some of these interventions. But the interventions themselves, while they cost money, we are saying that they must be assessed in such a way that we are looking at the productive elements out of them, productivity rather than just handing out money to these, what I call somehow freebies. So that's the challenge. There's something I wanted to say about some of the points Sami made. Well, Sami, to some extent, is right about the mining issue. I mean, it's clear that even though we accept that the president didn't say that he's going to necessarily repeal the law, I think activists have been asking for the repeal of the law, not just amend the law, right? People also thought that would have gone ahead to what's it called, state of emergency in all these areas and ensure that the right things are done. I think we cannot say that simply because the 120-day pact, even though it mentions mining, illegal mining, we should not talk about what I call the ancillary issues concerning the repeal of the law itself, as well as making sure that there's some state of emergency. I mean, these interventions are useful. I see that, and I see that the government is going to spend almost 50 million Ghana cedis in ensuring that these interventions
on the mining anti-galamsey,
which is much more than we've ever had before. So if there's anything to be said about that, we have to make sure that because we are spending so much on it, we must get the proper results. And I think that is really important. But I mean, it's important to also be clear that when the NDC, when the president decided to reduce the number of ministries and ministers, we calculated that the money that automatically that was going to, for wages, just wages alone, that was going to be a savings of almost about 1.5 billion Ghana cedis in the 4-year term. I mean, if we added the fact that these ministers normally would also be enjoying what the Article 71 holders enjoy, that was going to come to almost 3 billion Ghana cedis. So I think there's something to be said about savings there. I think these are some few points.
And Sami, I know you want to come in, but you asked a question I need to clarify. No academic fee policy.
Yes.
You say it has been implemented, but no money has been paid.
Samson.
Evans.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Evans, because of I come here.
No, it's okay. I get it. But no money has been paid. So why are you saying it's been achieved?
Oh, but the point is that government has done what it has to do. The point is that somehow the academic calendar got tweaked a bit. So normally students will go to school in September. August,
but they went in.
That's it. They went in January. At the time, we hadn't even read the budget, so there was no way we could.
But the budget had been read. Appropriation.
Yes, that is true.
Paid to the schools.
That is true, but you have to go through a process. First of all, you have to register the students. You have to know how many students are there, and the president gave details. Close to 500 million Ghana cedis has been devoted for this. It will cover over 150,000 students.
So you have the numbers.
So it's been done. Students have been asked to key in their details so that the money is dispersed. We are using the Student Loan Trust Fund because they have a system for such disbursement, and it will be done. So
when is it?
And then the government has done what it has to do.
Because if you haven't disbursed,
so once
Sami's
we get,
point is that you can't
no,
take
but
that as complete.
Evans,
it's okay.
Evans, the point is this: that what else will government do beyond what it has done? Government has opened the portal since 2 weeks ago for people to key in their details so that the monies will be sent to them. Once you do it, it will be done. So there's really no way you can say that it has not been done. Money has been done, appropriation has been made, the system for doing so has been put in place. The onus lies on students to access it. That is what is ongoing at the moment. So I don't know why he wants to split hairs over this matter.
Well,
he was in parliament, he passed the budget, didn't he? He passed appropriation. So what exactly is he worried about?
Sami?
No, I've been very quiet and admiring the quantum of lies.
Come on.
I'm telling you, I'm going to point it out.
Come on.
And the inaccuracies in the argument. So, first of all, Felix is now saying that because of the merger of ministries, the scrapping of ministries, is led to some significant savings, even within the office of the government machinery. This is factually inaccurate. what we spent in 2024. In 2025, we are spending a colossal amount of over 2.7 billion cedis for the running of the office of the government machine.
More than you spent.
More than you spent in 2024. So the very accusation that indeed you've made savings is not reflected in the budget and the projections being made. That's point number one. Point number two, when it suits Felix and the NDC, they say, oh, the IMF has that, the NPP signed up to this IMF program, and so if today we've had increases in electricity tariff and that of water, is the doing of the NPP. This is laughable. The IMF's wording never said increment, it said adjustment. And who told you adjustment means that it's always increase?
But Sammy,
no, Franklin,
hold on.
I beg you.
Hold on.
I waited patiently for him to. Okay, that's fine. You please go on.
I think
but it's only fair that when you.
No, you will. Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, that's
I think the point can be made really that there's a history to these adjustments. If you look at the debts that you guys left behind, they are humongous. So, Dennis, how much debt do we have in there?
Yes.
So then it means that we have to clear those debts and make sure that we still pay for. I mean, I also pay for electricity. I mean, recently I called the Achimota manager. I said, what is this? At the PRC, there's a technical person there. I said, the meter you gave me, it runs like more than Usain Bolt. I've been spending close to sometimes 80 cedis a day, and I don't understand it, right? But the explanation also is that, look, there's this debt that we need to clear, which is not the reason why the meters are running faster, by the way. But I think it is important to make the point that these adjustments that were mentioned in the IMF has its roots in the way the sector was managed.
Can I go on?
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting input from Franklin. So the NDC did indicate that, in fact, Franklin did even just stated that we left a humongous debt of 726.68 billion, right? If you look at the figures for 2024. If you check the projections for 2025, NDC is expected to spend beyond this by 56.90 billion per their own budgets that they presented to the House of Parliament. So which effort are they making to even reduce our debt stock? That is point number one. And let me get back to the issue that I was raising with the IMF matter. So when the IMF tells you that you also have to be adjusting tariffs, so it means that you have to be increasing. It can also even be reduction. But what I'm trying to point it out to them is that you were very quick to take the applause for the removal of the 10% on the betting and also 1% on e-levy. But I'm telling and pointing it out to you that, again, it was also part of even the IMF's own arrangement that of the betting tax remained. But so when it suits you, you take that one off and impose additional 14% on electricity and 4% on water. That cannot be glossed over. That cannot be swept under the carpet.
We also wanted to touch on the currency.
On the issue of the currency, there's something interesting happening. And I took the Bank of Ghana's gold reserves. That thanks to Dr. Bawumia, we started this gold purchase program in May 2023. And since independence, we only had 8.78 tons of gold as our reserves. At the time the NPP was leaving office, we had 30.53 tons of gold, meaning that we've added in excess of over 21 tons of gold. Okay. The NDC reports us at the end of April that it now stands at 31.37 tons of gold. This is according to the Bank of Ghana. I'm not the one faking it. Then let me take the majority chief whip, the Honorable Dafiame post that he made. Very interesting. It's here. He says that in January 2025, 6.17 tons of gold purchases and exports valued at $506 million. 2, February 2025, 6.55 tons valued at $571 million of gold purchases and exports. March, 7.81 tons valued at $699 million. And then April, 9.2 tons valued at $889 million. If you add this, it takes you to 29.73 tons. 29.73 tons of gold added to either our reserves or external. Interestingly, if you take the Bank of Ghana's own, the breakdown of what they've given us, they are only telling us that since January, only 1 point something ton had been added. What happened to the almost 18? Yeah, this Bank of Ghana. Yeah, I'm giving you, these are the figures here, and I'm giving you what the Fiamepo posted. And Evans, it's also not reflecting in your foreign reserves, because Ghana's foreign reserves now stands at around $9.4, $9.5 billion worth of our gold. So it's neither reflecting in the gold reserves of the Bank of Ghana nor our international reserves. But there's something more interesting that I want Felix to also answer. If you multiply this 29.73 tons, worth about, in fact, if you calculate the tons, it takes you to 2. In terms of USD, if you add the January, February, March, and April, based on the post that was made by the chief whip, it takes you to $2.6 billion worth of our gold, purchased and export. Okay. If you multiply this by, let's say the exchange rate for today is 14.5 billion, 14.5 as the exchange rate today, it gives you a total of over 38.6 billion cedis. There are two things. Either government is only just using this exchange and what we get to show up our currency, which the Bank of Ghana has denied, that there is nothing artificial. It is because, in fact, the economists all over the world will tell you that the intervention of the central banks in the currency manipulation or showing it up.
You just explained that they've released $500 million, but it is to pay energy sector debt.
Okay.
Energy sector,
no problem. I have enough skin to also even debate that. The same IMF program that they are telling you not to go beyond $60 million worth of it on month-by-month basis. So clearly, even when it's used them, they are telling you IMF says we should do
so
this.
on the currency, are you claiming that it's artificial?
On the currency, I'm saying we are all happy to see the strength of our cedi. But mind you, there's a whole gamut of issues also happening within the global space. The U.S. trade tariff war with other countries and the diversion of traffic. And then, much more importantly, there's a huge suspicion that the gold that you cannot account for, the 29.73 billion tons, is either the revenue from it has been used to show up the currency, because you cannot find it. It's neither stated on the Bank of Ghana's own breakdown, because it tells you that they've only added one. But if you look at the post, they are telling you 29.73 tons.
Okay,
I find it very interesting.
Again, he's conflating gold exports with reserves. That's all. You see, he's conflating gold exports with reserves.
Oh,
that's what he's doing.
Let me make a point. The Fiame post is clear.
But you're talking about gold exports done by gold board.
Felix,
he's not talking about reserves added to the Bank of Ghana vote.
Felix, so the gold export that the Fiame post spoke about, where is that revenue?
When they export the gold, they get revenue. The Bank of Ghana gives them $1 equivalent. They take the that's how you build your forex reserve.
Okay.
They are conflating two different matters.
So
gold borders.
So it comes into your external reserves or what? Because it's not reflecting in your external reserves. That's what I'm telling you.
So no, but
that's what I'm telling you. Google it and check it. You see, check the latest figures.
Let him address.
You are creating the impression that if gold board buys gold, they go and give it to the Bank of Ghana to keep it in their votes. So you build their gold reserves.
No, they sell it.
Yes.
Gold
so the
let me Bank of Ghana. The gold
let him, because of the sake of time, let him.
When they go and purchase gold, they don't go and give it to the Bank of Ghana to put in these votes to build reserves. The Fiamepo gave you a monthly breakdown of gold exports and the revenues accruing thus far. That's all. So you are here conflating two things. You are expecting that the moment gold board says they have gold, they should reflect the Bank of Ghana's gold reserve. That is not the case. So for me, it is a moot issue. But then we come to this attempt to find solace under the wording of the IMF memorandum, which they themselves signed. You see, the adjustments take account of happenings in the previous quarter. So when Franklin speaks about the debt, they built up debt that you must adjust for in your tariff in order to clear. Otherwise, it adds on to the problems you have in the sector. That is all that has happened. But you were the ones who committed us to do so in the preceding year, after you went to gleefully collect over $300 million to put into your budget. And you are turning around to make it seem as though the NDC has done anything wrong and that we have done anything novel. You committed us to it. Deny that it was your finance minister who agreed. Is it not on page 71 of the memorandum the IMF has published? Anybody watching me can Google it and see. The other point, Evans.
One said you increase.
Yes. Yeah. But why do you think that
no,
but why
that is not there. So don't be
Evans. No.
They never stated that increase.
Why? Okay. Why was there the need for adjustment in the first place? In fact, what they also have not told you is that in September or so, they agreed with the IMF to do a major adjustment over 54%. In fact, the figure is actually there.
Major tariff
so how could the IMF have foreseen an increase if it was just about either increasing or reducing?
You're making another point.
So he simply is being mischievous.
Yes,
has been part of IMF negotiation.
I wanted to.
So how gives you the percentage?
How come you agreed to a September major tariff adjustment? What is it about?
Let's
you go and muddy the waters up north. Then you come south to will
in there for the record.
I'm saying
that IMF,
but factually,
part of IMF's
factually, yes. The document says adjustment.
Exactly.
Yes. But he's also giving the context.
That is what the context within which you agree.
The context within which the adjustment was. Only means definitely.
Look, if they anticipated reductions, if they anticipated reductions, they wouldn't even put it in the document.
Please address your final point.
It is to hold you to the adjustment to cater for the debt.
Please address your final point.
Now, again, this point about the budget of the office of the president, there's a hackneyed issue. We've explained it. But you know, their big lie theory repeats the lie so many times that it sticks. It was defeated by the very person who proposed it, Goebbels. In the end, Goebbels, he shot himself dead when the Russians or the Soviets.
Let me
make the point.
It's a significant thing.
So you can't repeat a lie and think that it will stick. First of all, you are an MP. You see, do yourself justice. Show respect to the people you represent by being factual. When you pick the budget, you know right away that, but for additions of agencies that hitherto were not part of Office of Government Machinery, you only record that figure. Look, if you take a national security and the three agencies under me, ISD, GBC, and what have you. These four entities, and national security in any event is divided into four. It has the research department, it has National Signals Bureau, it has the NIB, and National Security Secretariat itself. If you add these, they've added close to 12,000 employees to the Office of Government Machinery. So their compensation naturally would go up. This one is a no-brainer. But if you want to see where the savings are being made, you look at discretionary expenditure, which is goods and services and capex. That has reduced by 420 million Ghana cedis. Indeed, as I speak to you, national security has now been moved to the Interior Ministry. So when you look at the budget, you see that it is roughly 300 million Ghana cedis lower than what they paid in 2024. So this mischief is intended only.
Final word for all of us. But because you need to wrap up, Sammy. So today,
if you make
we have to wrap up.
All right.
So 120.
Sammy again of
Felix.
Yes.
Now he's infected me with it. Felix.
Yes.
So the 121 day has expired.
Yes.
Now what?
Now.
So you believe you've ticked the box?
We've ticked the box.
So from the 121st day, as in tomorrow, what happens?
It shows that President Mahama has the needed credibility to continue to enjoy the support of the people of Ghana, because he said he would do things and he has done them. And these are far-reaching measures. Of course, it is only scratching the surface, we agree, because there's even a broader manifesto which we need to implement. So from the 121st day, we are going to zoom into doing things that ensure that we achieve the objectives that we set for ourselves in the manifesto. The ultimate aim is to ensure that Ghanaians enjoy a situation that is much better than what President Mahama inherited. And to the extent that he has shown from the onset that he means business and that he's going to fulfill the promise he makes, I think that people can continue.
Then it's just a big question now.
Yeah.
What next? What should the government be focusing on after the 121 days?
I think the focus should be two main things. High impact areas, structural reforms. Else the goals that they've set, either in their manifesto or the reforms they are seeking within the economy, will be hard for them to
Okay. Frankly?
Well, prudence. And I think, what's the other word I wanted to use? Pragmatism should be the guard words for this government. And I think they may go far.
And I need to look in the crystal ball very briefly, because we've all experienced governments, when they start in the first few months, they are very good in terms of saying the right things, ticking the right boxes, and robbing us all off in very good ways. You give them a year and two, and then you begin to see, but where did all that good work, enthusiasm, goodwill, where did it all disappear to?
Well, which is why you and I have to keep watching. We'll continue our watchdog role, playing our watchdog role. We'll continue assessing them. I think we'll be back here next year.
We should.
1 year to assess what they've done. It's the only way we can mobilize a lot of citizens to demand accountability. And I think it's the only way we can ensure that politicians...
Let me go to the mighty minority.
Well, Evans, I maintain that no administration scores zero. The very fact that they occupy even the administration means that at least they have to be doing something to help advance the cause of our welfare. Again, I want to also state, also unequivocally, that I do not see much of the lean government. There are some appointments that never existed that has been added. And I can tell you, if you go to Tema PSC shipyard, there was no deputy. There's now a deputy. If you go to MEF, there was no deputy. There's now a deputy. And all these SOEs, make no mistake, they also have a way of affecting our national life and our economic lives as well. And last but not the least, today, when the NDC were contesting to win the elections, they knew that the academic calendar was definitely going to start beginning of the year. So if you're telling me that, oh, you came in and then...
what could we have done?
Felix.
We didn't even have a budget. How are we going to pay the fees?
So giving me that excuse now doesn't and then you're telling me that government has done what it has to do.
Yeah.
When? Up to date, I can tell you no student has received anything of that sort. And then finally,
yes.
I keep saying, and we maintain, that you took out 10% on the betting tax, 1% e-levy, and gave us almost 20% more.
So that is Samuel Woku. Felix, thank you very much. Dennis and Franklin. From tomorrow, we need to now begin to monitor what the next year looks like in terms of making sure that the gains are sustained over time. And we'll be relying on our colleagues from IMANI and other civil society organizations in partnership with them to hold government's feet to the fire. Enjoy the rest of your evening.